Good afternoon, everyone. A step into the past. Mosul, golden idols, DNA pouches seen across our planet, and archaeologists uncover Palace of the Mittani Empire. Hadn't heard about them too much. I didn't know if this was really truly a climate event or so many dams being constructed on the Euphrates as well as the Tigris that would have an effect and bring this palace to the surface again. Jumping back in the past, 34 to 3,500 years ago, we sure do see a decline in rainfall, the collapse of an empire. And during this new Grand Solar Minimum, how prepared are you for emergencies? My Patriot Supply long-term food storage 2-week grab-and-go food crate or the 4-week bucket supply. Either 92 servings or 252 servings. That should give you peace of mind as food prices rise globally due to agricultural losses this year. Starting off here at the Hatra ruins in Mosul City in Iraq, ancient ruins. To give you an idea how massive that is, the Jeep in front should give you an indication of how advanced civilizations were at that time to construct such large structures. Going to be talking about the Hittites, Assyrians, Mittani, and the Egyptians. Taking a look at 3,500 years ago, the Mittani king, Shao-Shatartar. And I saw the symbolism right there with the lions and the crows. Thought I'd wide that out for you here. Kurdish Mittani Empire on the left morphed into something that we can see with the pineal gland at the top, this time in the royal seal of the modern Kurdish Izdanism religion. But these symbols are old. We're going back into the cradle of our civilization. The reason I would even be looking at such things here is the archaeologists uncovered the palace in the Mittani Empire. This made the news headlines. The Mosul Dam has gone so low that now this palace is once again unearthed. So if we are going to step back in time, we don't hear about this very much, especially the Assyrians. Our history going back this far is very sketchy, very murky, and very little, except for what the museums tell us how it is. How many times did you hear about this in your history book when you were growing up, Mittanis and Hittites? So I thought to myself, all right, look at the rivers there. Obviously, before the dam construction, very much water flow. This is a cradle of civilization after all. But coming into our modern era, we can see the Euphrates River being dammed in multiple locations, Turkey to Syria, which would restrict water flow, obviously. And then when we come to the Euphrates, we see this exact same phenomenon, dam, completely blocking off water flow for whatever they decide to let through. Now, there's been 2 mega constructions recently that have pulled back water flow even further. So is this truly a drought on the 3,400-year scale, or is it a combination of dams restricting water flow and also the drought cycle in itself? Looking at the Tigris River, flows being restricted. And even looking in Iraq itself, you can see these major waterways coming through the major dams in country as well. So taking this into consideration, I thought I would match the past with, is it a probable water cycle or not? Or is it just this man-made phenomenon drying out the country? Starting over on Heritage Daily, the Mittani Empire covered an area, as we saw on that map, reaching the eastern Mediterranean, all the way over to northern Iraq. The Akkadians were at this time the cuneiform tablets from the Sumerians also around. This writing system was still intact at that time. Egyptian pharaohs, kings of the Hittites, Babylonia, all the names that you've heard from the inception, moving from the kings and queens into Europe. Now, this span of time that we're talking about here, 3,500 to 3,400 years prior. Now, they did start battling with the Assyrians, which led to the collapse. And you might want to ask yourself, why was everything stable for centuries and then they just started fighting with the Assyrians one day? Makes no sense. Hittites collapsed, Mittani collapsed, Babylon collapses, Assyria collapses. But we see the same iconography represented again and again and again. The winged flying beasts, large 10, 12, 15-foot tall beings all worshiping the sun or different celestial objects. We see DNA pouches, which we have witnessed across the planet. And it's always the same iconography. DNA intertwining, and they knew much more back then than we give them credit for, specifically about DNA and possibly human genome mapping and thereby creation of species. In the Mittani Empire, chronology here, 1500 BC all the way to 1200 BC. Wait a second, that matches on the 400-year interval of this Grand Solar Minimum. 1200 would be the collapse. The beginning would be around 1600 BC, but it's actually 1540. That gives that 60-year window of recovery from the last Grand Solar Minimum wiping out crop production. The gates of Mosul, 3D imagery. If you stare at that long enough, you're going to see 3D images pop out of there, which is quite interesting. But we get right back into the winged lions, golden idols. We find some of these same mixed animal races, lion-headed, two-legged beast, horse-legged human figurines, gigantic in girth and stature. And are they really holding spears together like this, or are they creating an energy portal? So many things that we have been led astray in our ancient past. And when you look at reliefs like this, if these guys are 6 feet tall, then how large is that horse? There's others as well that look like horses are 14, 15 feet long, 9 feet tall. You know, I don't see horses that girthy or that large in today's world. Ishtar, we get the star pattern right in front in the wheel, but we also saw that back in the Kurdish Mittani Empire representations. And wherever you go through the ancient past, it is always the same symbolism again and again and again. So what were the messages that they were leaving for us here at this modern time? Well, when we look at a 3,400-year-old civilization collapse, Bronze Age, again, I do believe it's a combination of a drought cycle as well as the modern infrastructure, but when we do look back in time here, this takes us back 6,000 years in rain cycle. Red means less rain, green means more rain. If you start at the far left of the chart here, that's 6,000 years in the past. Look how much rainier it was in that same exact area of Eastern Mediterranean, Syria, Iraq, that we see today is bone dry. The blue box I included there because that is the time that this collapsed. 3,500 years ago, exceptional drought. It's the highest drought index on the entire 6,000 year span of time. And then we had the conflict between the Assyrians and the Mittani. Again, it was all about food resources, land and water scarcity, which led to these conflicts. I'm in firm belief of that. I actually did a story on this already. This is the Akkadian Empire collapse due to, right on that 400-year cycle, bring us up a little closer in history, around 1200 BC. They fell right after. Now also take a look at the iconography here of the human on the right and the giant godlike figure on the left. We've seen this before. There was something in our ancient past that is not being passed down to us. And we're looking at oxygen 18 isotopes here, so the lower you go or the higher the value on the number at -4 versus -7 means it's getting way wetter at the bottom where the arrows are. And if you just start counting, it's in a 400 to 500 year interval. Grand Solar Minimum. Grand Solar Minimum double bottom peak, collapse, collapse. Grand Solar Minimum 1200 years before present. We start to see the collapse, and we're in it again. So when we see this new Grand Solar Minimum on top of us, we might want to learn from the past. You know, this is the area covered here in all the studying that I've done for this video. And it brings us right back to these same DNA pouches that we've seen across all the continents that were supposedly unconnected 3,500 to 2,500 years ago. But why is it the same from Göbekli Tepe all the way through to the Mayans? I want to bring you here on one of the swords as well to take a look in there. Very discernible, very easy to see the DNA stranding on the right. That is not a handle. The handle is inside the sword sheath. I've linked everything below in the description box so you can chase down all these images, take a browse through our history here for the last 5,000 years and let your mind wander as to what really happened. We're on a climate cycle. We're in it again. Our civilizations are going to collapse in these next few years because we're so fragile with the economy, the just-in-time delivery system. I've tried to detail this the best I can in my new book, Climate Revolution, The Grand Solar Minimum, Understand, Prepare, Adapt, and Thrive. Even did a section here on how the Grand Solar Minimum increases rainfall or, in the inverse, decreases it. We're in climate patterns again. I hope you're preparing. Links in the description box below, and I wish you the best of luck in your preparations. The decline of our modern civilization has already begun.